Every day, millions of people photograph it. Tourists line up across the street to capture it. Directors use it as shorthand for New York itself. It appears on postcards, coffee mugs, hotel room walls, and dentist office prints in cities that have never heard of Fifth Avenue. And it has been almost completely empty since 2019. The Flatiron Building is one of the most recognized structures on Earth. It has stood at the corner of Fifth Avenue and Broadway for more than 120 years. It survived the Great Depression, 2 World Wars, the September 11 attacks, and the complete transformation of the New York skyline around it. Buildings 50 times its size have risen and fallen within its sightline. The Flatiron has outlasted all of them in the public imagination. But today, from the 2nd floor to the 22nd floor, there is nobody inside. The offices are empty, the corridors are silent. The only occupied space is a single mobile phone store on the ground floor. The most photographed building in New York is a shell. How a structure this famous ended up this empty involves a construction company that vanished, an ownership dispute that went to court, an auction winner who disappeared without paying, and a city that cannot decide what a 120-year-old landmark is actually for. This is the full story. In 1901, a triangular plot of land in Manhattan sat mostly useless at the intersection of Fifth Avenue, Broadway, and East 22nd Street. The shape of the lot was the problem. Where Broadway cuts diagonally across Manhattan's grid, it creates awkward wedge-shaped parcels at each intersection. Most developers avoided them. The geometry seemed to guarantee failure. The Fuller Company did not agree. The Fuller Company was one of America's most ambitious construction firms. Its founder, George A. Fuller, had pioneered a new method of building, the steel cage frame, that allowed structures to rise far higher than traditional load-bearing masonry ever could. Fuller had not invented the skyscraper exactly, but he had perfected the system that made them possible. His company had built towers across Chicago and was now turning its attention to New York. Fuller died in 1900, 1 year before the Flatiron Project began. His son-in-law Harry Black took control of the company and purchased the triangular lot for what seemed like an impossible ambition. He hired Daniel Burnham, the most celebrated architect in America, to design a building that would serve as the company's new headquarters and prove that no plot of land in Manhattan was unbuildable. Burnham looked at the triangular lot and designed something that had never been attempted. Rather than fighting the shape of the land, he embraced it entirely. The building would mirror the plot precisely, a 22-story tower with a razor-sharp triangular footprint, narrowing to a point just 6 feet wide at its northern tip. The angle at the building's sharpest corner measures only 25 degrees. Construction began in 1901 and proceeded at remarkable speed. Workers added a new floor roughly every week. The steel frame rose from the triangular foundation, and New Yorkers stopped to watch, uncertain whether the structure would survive the winds that funneled between buildings along Fifth Avenue. The local press was not impressed. Critics called it Burnham's Folly. Newspapers questioned whether a building this shape could stand at all. One publication described it as an architectural monstrosity. The building was compared unfavorably to a slice of cake, the nose of a locomotive, and a clothes iron, the last comparison being the one that eventually stuck permanently. It opened on October 1, 1902. Within months, the skeptics had gone quiet. The building worked. The steel frame, engineered to withstand 4 times the maximum wind force of the area, barely noticed the gusts that New Yorkers had feared would bring it down. The triangular shape that everyone had called impractical turned out to be among the most structurally sound geometries in architecture. The building that critics said could not stand was now one of the most stable structures in Manhattan. It was also immediately famous. Photographers discovered it within weeks of opening. The combination of the dramatic shape, the location at the edge of Madison Square Park, and the way the building seemed to slice the cityscape like a ship's prow made it irresistible to anyone with a camera. Alfred Stieglitz photographed it in 1902, and the image became iconic before the building's first year was complete. Edward Steichen photographed it at night, at dusk, through rain. The Flatiron entered the visual language of New York City almost before it had a single tenant. The Fuller Company occupied the building for 27 years. When they moved out in 1929, a parade of tenants followed across the following decades. Clothing designers, toy manufacturers, publishing houses. The building that critics had called unbuildable turned out to be one of the most desirable addresses in Manhattan for nearly a century. In 1966, New York City designated the Flatiron Building a landmark. This was recognition of its cultural importance, but also a constraint on its future. Any renovations, alterations, or construction work on the building would now require approval from the Landmarks Preservation Commission. The designation protected the building from demolition, but also complicated every decision its owners would ever make. In 1989, the federal government added it to the National Register of Historic Places and designated it a National Historic Landmark. The Flatiron was now protected at every level of government. Nobody could touch it without permission from multiple authorities. This was meant to ensure its survival. It would eventually contribute to its paralysis. By the early 2000s, the building's primary tenant was Macmillan Publishers, one of the largest publishing houses in America. Macmillan occupied the building for 15 years, filling floors that had once housed toy companies and fashion designers with editors, agents, and the machinery of the modern book industry. For a brief period, the Flatiron Building was the unlikely center of American literary publishing. Then, in 2019, Macmillan moved out. They did not leave because of any crisis or catastrophe. They left because the building's aging systems, limited floor plate sizes, and lack of modern amenities made it increasingly difficult to operate as a contemporary office. The Flatiron was designed in 1901. Its triangular floor plan, which made it architecturally unique, also meant that every floor was a narrow wedge shape. Modern office layouts require open rectangular spaces. The Flatiron could not provide them. When Macmillan departed, the building had 5 co-owners. What happened next demonstrates precisely how a famous building becomes an empty one. The 5 co-owners could not agree on anything. One owner wanted to find a new commercial tenant without renovating the building first. The other 4 wanted to renovate before leasing. One owner proposed an arrangement so unusual that the other co-owners called it physically impossible, dividing the Flatiron Building into 5 separate properties, one for each owner, carved out of a single triangular structure. A New York State judge eventually had to intervene, ruling in 2022 that the 4 co-owners could buy out the 5th. While the ownership dispute dragged through the courts, the building sat empty. Renovation plans stalled. The pandemic arrived in 2020 and made every decision more complicated. The building that had been photographed millions of times was now wrapped in scaffolding, its famous limestone facade hidden behind construction barriers, its floors silent. In early 2023, a court ordered the building to be sold at auction. The auction took place in March 2023. A bidder named Jacob Garlick submitted the winning bid of $190 million. The room celebrated. The gavel came down. Then Garlick vanished. He never submitted his required deposit of $19 million. He did not respond to communications from the auction house. He disappeared, as one press report described it, into the ether. The $190 million winning bid evaporated along with him. Nobody has provided a satisfying explanation for what happened. The auction that was supposed to resolve the Flatiron's future had produced nothing but a new mystery. A second auction was scheduled for May 2023. This time, the majority ownership group, led by Jeffrey Garral of GFP Real Estate, submitted the winning bid of $161 million and actually paid it. The building finally had a clear owner with the resources and the intention to act. The plan they announced was not what most people expected. Rather than restoring the Flatiron Building to office use, the new ownership group announced they would convert it entirely to luxury residential condominiums. The 200,000 square foot building would be transformed into 60 residential units. The ground floor would remain commercial. Everything above it would become apartments. The Brodsky Organization, a New York firm specializing in residential conversions, purchased a controlling stake in October 2023 and took charge of the project. Plans were filed with the city in August 2024. Construction was scheduled to begin in early 2025, with completion anticipated by 2026. The conversion reflects something larger happening across Manhattan. Office vacancy rates in New York reached nearly 20% following the pandemic. Companies downsized. Remote work eliminated the need for enormous floor plates. Buildings designed for one era found themselves stranded in another. The Flatiron situation was dramatic because of its fame, but it was not unique. Dozens of Manhattan office buildings faced the same obsolescence simultaneously. The city that built the world's most famous office towers in the 20th century is now converting them to apartments in the 21st. There is an irony in the Flatiron's transformation that is easy to miss. The building was considered dangerously unconventional when it was built. Critics said the triangular shape was wrong, that the winds would destroy it, that no sensible person would rent space inside it. Every prediction proved incorrect. The building outlasted its critics by more than a century. Now, it faces its most fundamental transformation. The structure that defined what a modern office building could look like in 1902 will become something its architect never imagined: a residential building in one of the world's most expensive real estate markets. The 60 apartments it will contain will almost certainly be among the most expensive in Manhattan. The address alone commands a premium that few buildings anywhere can match. The people who will eventually live on floors that once housed publishing executives and toy manufacturers will wake up each morning inside one of the most famous buildings on Earth. Whether they will appreciate that is another question. George Vanderbilt built Biltmore and believed it would shelter his family for centuries. The Flatiron's builders believed it would anchor a construction empire for generations. Both assumptions were correct about the structure and wrong about the purpose. The buildings endured. The intentions did not. Standing at Madison Square Park today, looking across at the Flatiron's narrow northern tip, visitors see exactly what Alfred Stieglitz saw in 1902. The shape has not changed. The limestone facade is the same. The 25-degree angle at the building's point still appears to slice the sky the way it always has. Inside, the floors are empty. The corridors are silent. The most photographed building in New York waits to become something new. It has been waiting before. It always finds a way through.